download it and read them. And I'd say as a convention delegate, reading through the rules is a good thing. There's a lot of them if you wanted to get into statute, but becoming familiar with the party rules itself would be very, very helpful for your participation. Rule 14 is the open meeting and the right to testify. It's very simple. I'll go ahead and read it. All meetings of any committee or subcommittee of any convention, whether it be temporary or permanent organization, shall be open to any delegate or alternate to that convention, any state or county Republican Party officer, any elected Republican Party office holder, or any Republican candidate. Those same people shall have the right to appear before any convention committee or subcommittee and make recommendations for the committee's consideration or testify concerning any item under purview of the committee. The committee may adopt reasonable rules, including time limits for such presentations, and may establish a reasonable limit of time for those presentations. This privilege shall include delegates and alternates under challenge at any convention. As was mentioned earlier, each committee will adopt supplementary rules that will usually cover testifying. Having served on the Rules Committee 2 years ago, I can tell you that most people that showed up to testify, and it wasn't necessarily scheduled in advance, although you could do the courtesy of letting the chair of that committee know that you would like to testify and set up the time. You don't have to, but it would be a courtesy, and it would certainly go smoother if you did. Everybody that showed up to testify got the opportunity, and they were afforded, yes, Reed?
Oh, I was going to ask, so that rule applies to all the temporary committees beforehand as well,
yes,
correct?
Temporary and permanent.
Okay. I had heard something about an officials committee that met last week in Austin that was part of the convention.
The officials committee is actually part of the State Republican Executive Committee.
Okay, but is that doing convention business?
That's a separate organization. Tim, would you know how that committee works?
What he's talking about is with regard to credentials challenges. And every convention we get a number of credentials challenges for anything from someone voted in the Democrat primary and in fact was not eligible to vote to, I tell you, the sky's the limit as to what you get from credentials challenges. And some of them really are truly unique and interesting and have nothing to do with the convention whatsoever. So in our rules, what it sets out is rather than those automatically going to the temporary committee, the officials committee, which is a subcommittee of the State Republican Executive Committee, it is made up of a variety of officers as well as elected members. The body of the SREC elects members to sit on that committee. And what they do is they go through each of the credentials challenges. They are not looking at the substance of the challenge or the merit of the challenge. They are simply looking at whether or not the challenge met the technical rules set out in 27B. For example, if you challenge someone, you have to be in their Senate district or in their county. If you challenge someone, you are required to send it by a certain date to me as the state chairman by certified or registered mail, as well as to the person you are challenging. And so what that officials committee does, and this really saves time and makes sure that the credentials committee are addressing those things that really do have substance and met all the requirements. And so we simply look through those to see whether or not did they in fact send the challenge to the state chairman by the deadline. Did they send a registered certified mail to the person being challenged? We go through each of those to say if they met all of the requirements, then they get passed on to the credentials committee. If they did not meet those rules, then they do not move on to the credentials challenge. And I might say any decision made by that committee is that the person making the challenge or the person being challenged has a right to appeal that decision. So that committee operates simply as a ministerial or administrative part of the state executive committee to help that business at the convention. So everything, whether it be the appeal itself on those technical and all of those, when you look with regard to merit, will be looked at by the temporary committee at the state convention. And so Tom was absolutely right. That is a separate entity The convention itself is different from the SREC, and it was a ministerial function. So you'll be able to sit in on the credentials. They have their own rules, and I will tell you that at the Credentials Committee, and I chaired that committee in the past, I think it was 2000, one side of the story always sounds good until you hear the other side of the story. I think that's out of the Bible, and I think it's, of course, absolutely true, but I think in our experience we know it's true as well. So the committee will hear from the people doing the challengers as well as the challengees, so they can make a decision on the merits of that case after hearing both sides.
Thanks, Tina. The appeal that Tina talked about, and Tina's absolutely right, it's all set out in Rule 27B, the whole filing of challenges for the state convention. The procedure that Tina just described on the State Officials Committee is almost exactly described word for word in 27B2. And then the appeal right is 27B3. And those decisions of the Officials Committee can be appealed up to 10 days prior to the date that the State Convention holds its first general session, which is going to be on that Thursday.
My question was more about the openness of that meeting.
Yeah, the Rule 14 calls for any meetings of any committee or subcommittee of any convention, whether it be a temporary or permanent organization. So, being that that's a separate, a separate subcommittee of the SREC, I'm not sure that Rule 14 would really cover that.